Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we want to talk this time about new planets. Usually we talk about the new moon or the full moon, and we're kind of in between at the moment. But I do want to take this opportunity. I mentioned quite a few times in the talks that I give about these configurations and other things that there are new planets beyond Pluto that have significance in astrological charts, and I've been working with those. And the first of those that I worked with is Eris, and my book, The 10th Planet, has been well received. I think it's pretty well known that I've at least articulated a good take on that archetype. I really feel like I nailed that archetype as a feminine warrior energy. And it goes to depth within the psyche. It's a feminine warrior energy for soul intention. So finding out what your deepest values are, what you absolutely must do, what you cannot not do. Vital for living this life to the fullest, vital for finding your most authentic self. It's really important in charts. So just as important as Pluto, I feel, which is a rather bold statement, but it seems to be true. Pluto, of course, is in that same category as a dwarf planet according to the astronomy allocations, but actually, we have a different way of looking at things, including the sun and moon, as planets from a geocentric standpoint in astrology. And from the standpoint of astrology, Pluto is absolutely still a planet. So that's the background for this. I want to show you some charts. This time I'm going to be using a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to be giving on Saturday, actually in the fullest. So let me go to that first of all. So you should be able to see this first slide, which is the title slide. Now, this is part of a talk that I'm going to be giving for the NCGR. At 1 p.m. Pacific Coast time on Saturday. So if you want to tune in for a longer presentation, I'm not sure what the charges are for that, but I think it's reasonable. And they are located at ncgrsanfrancisco.org. It's ncgr San Francisco all run together.org. So you can go there and you can see about the talk, and I'm not sure what the arrangements are to get on the Zoom for that. But let me just show you some charts, and we'll talk about these things a little bit more. Because these new KBO planets are actually 3 in number beyond Pluto that have been named officially by the IAU. And as I say, in astrology, we have a different definition of planet than they do in the astronomy. And for example, Pluto and Eris are definitely planets in the fullest sense of the word. And the suspicion came to me that these new ones beyond Pluto, besides Eris, would be also significant in charts, and I've found a lot of information on that, and it's really fascinating, because it's new planets in Western astrology. It's also a philosophical question of what does it imply that we have these new planets coming along at this time in terms of the zeitgeist. And as far as feminine is concerned, we do have quite a bit of evidence. This is the book I wrote, The 10th Planet. And this is the question about what to do with these other two. And these are the glyphs that I'm using for Maki Maki and for Haumea, the 2 other planets named after indigenous gods and goddesses beyond Pluto. And you know that the feminine is on the rise. There's a lot of feminine leaders coming along, the Me Too and the Time's Up movements. Just very clearly there is a feminine warrior motif, archetype that's coming into the zeitgeist at this time. And also I feel that these new planets have to do with profound connection to nature. So that is the thesis that I'm presenting here. And here's the slide about Haumea, creation goddess of the Hawaiian people. She had a magic wand that could make food appear. So this is really a motif or an icon for the idea of nature itself, always giving off new forms, always changing. She gave birth from many different parts of her body, from her womb, her breasts, her hip, and then regenerated as a young woman. Therefore, a representation for nature itself. And you can see here a graphic, but also this is the actual planetary picture. Haumea is elongated from her rapid orbital speed, not her orbital speed, but her rotation speed as she spins on her axis like the Earth does. So that's interesting because it's kind of a shape-shifting quality that the physical planet itself has. And as I say, she does represent nature very specifically. Whoops. So we also have, as you know, Maki Maki, which is from the Rapa Nui people. And that was the creation god of Rapa Nui on Easter Island. They made those huge stone heads, and they had rites and cults that led to connection with nature. The first egg of the season on a neighboring rocky landmass would be brought back, and that would be the champion. That from that person who won the competition would be chosen the Birdman of the year, and they would be the leader, the spiritual leader of their people, like the shaman shamanic leader. And so that's why the glyph that I've adopted for Maki Maki, which was actually suggested by astrologer Philip Sedgwick, looks a little bit like a birdman. It's a variation of the Pluto glyph, as is also, you can see, the glyph for Haumea is another variation on the Pluto glyph designed to show a pregnant woman. So that's how those glyphs came about. And I find that the Maki Maki is also connection to nature. They both move at about the same speed around the zodiac, around the horoscope, so it's very interesting. And they seem to have similar meaning as far as nature is concerned, but Maki Maki does seem to be more activist. So I'm giving you a little taste of this today. I don't have time to do a huge video on it, but I want to show you a couple of charts. These are the largest of the planets out in the Kuiper Belt. For comparison, here's the size of the moon. Here's Eris, just as big as Pluto, and then also, and they arguably a little bit bigger, and a little bit brighter and more dense. And then Haumea Maki Maki, and then others are smaller. Others that are in the Kuiper Belt, that is to say, are smaller. I don't think there's any examples here of some of the other ones. They're not too much, some of them are not too much smaller, but they're not actually officially designated as planets, which was why I've chosen to look at Haumea and Maki Maki, as well as Eris more specifically in charts, and I've done a lot of research on it. So here's the results of the research, Eris being the feminine warrior archetype, Maki Maki, also the connection to nature, and also tends to be more activist than Haumea, which is more of kind of, you could almost say, a tree hugger idea, just the love of nature. They recognize the connection of man to nature, which has many ramifications in terms of a connection also to natural law. These people are truth tellers, have a moral compass that they adhere to, recognize right and wrong as part of what's just a natural action. In other words, it's not coming from a book of rules or a religious doctrine, but it comes from just you might call it perennial wisdom, an idea that there is a certain attitude towards the divine or the principle behind what there is. There's more to the universe than just materialism, and that's the message of these new planets. So, for example, portrayed on screen as a woman warrior, Gal Gadot, who portrayed Wonder Woman in the movie, has strong Eris, as you might expect. And also, interestingly, she has as well a strong Maki Maki and Haumea. You can see that it connects to Jupiter, so does Eris. Eris with Jupiter at the top of the chart. Of course, she's done quite well, been quite successful in her career. She stands out as a kind of a role model for people in her career. And she made a nice movie with Wonder Woman where there was a sense of what is right and what is wrong, and kindness being inherent in it. When the pandemic hit, interestingly, she organized a group of people to sing, each one a line to sing John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine there's no countries. Imagine there's no possessions. Imagine we can all just live as brothers and sisters on this earth. So, she's got definitely an attitude that I think is worthy of these new planets. Now, of course, other examples, one of the favorite examples I have is Carl Jung. So in Carl Jung's chart, we find that, for example, Eris with Mercury, partile trine, and he lectured in 3 languages. He was very articulate, very prolific as a writer. His collected works come to 18 volumes. And he spoke of the spirit Mercurius when he did his alchemical studies toward the end of his life. So Mercury does make sense as a strong, anytime Eris touches a planet in the chart, it's a strong planet. It does create that. And the house is strong. It's in his first house. He was an iconoclast. He wasn't bringing a new idea into being. And then you have also the connection that Haumea makes. She is here sitting between Moon and Pluto. She's a yod, part of a yod from Jupiter and Mars. So, and there's other connections as well. So Haumea is very strong in this chart. And there's this statement of Jung's, which I think is so fascinating. And I'll just show you that. It is the truth. a force of nature that expresses itself through me. I am only a channel. I can imagine in many instances where I would become sinister to you. For example, if life had led you to take up an artificial attitude, you wouldn't be able to stand me, because I am a natural being. By my very presence, I crystallize. I am a ferment. The unconscious of people who live in an artificial manner senses me as a danger. Everything about me irritates them, my way of speaking, my way of laughing. They sense nature. So isn't that a powerful statement? It's kind of just really sums up some of my attitude towards these new planets as being very important in charts and representing the connection to nature. And here's another strong example. This is here is Frederick von Schelling, and his chart actually has, as I expected, he was called the nature philosopher. He was considered a precursor to Jung. He said that man's subjectivity is a part of nature, the natural world. And so he was considered, apart from many of the people in his day, which was early 1800s, obviously, when he was working and articulating his philosophy, he wasn't just for all logic and materialism as was coming along. The idea of the 19th century was that man had it all over the rest of nature, and we should use nature for our purposes, and only man was ensouled. That is where the difference comes, realizing that all of nature is ensouled, that all of nature, including nature's creatures, are valuable and ensouled, and we have to take care of them, we have responsibility to them, we're part of the web of life. So this is the philosophy that's emerging, which is very important also to recognize. Just to show you the connection, I went looking for Jaume in his chart because of his being a precursor to Jung and having those attitudes about connection to nature. And we have his time of birth. It is conjunct the moon in the first house. It is also at 6 degrees or 7 degrees, we have Eris. We have the sun at 7 degrees. We have at 8 degrees opposite Saturn, we have Chiron. And by George, even 7 degrees of Taurus is Jupiter. So it really is all over his chart, connects to all these major factors in his chart. So basically a very strong position of Haumea in his chart, indicating that that's an archetype that he represents in his work, in his life, as was evident. And then here's another person, Terence McKenna, who also, by his very actions in life, exhibits a strong presence of all three of these, because he was very strong articulating his own point of view, very iconoclastic in his attitude. He wrote The Archaic Revival. He was talking about perennial philosophy at that time, and he does have strong positions also of Makemake and Haumea. Here's the chart. And the thing about it is, all the psychedelic explorers have strong Haumea and Makemake, so that's very interesting. They were exploring a facet of nature, an unusual one, and they were also exploring portions of the human condition. And so you must realize that when these archetypes come along, it is fascinating how that reflects into the zeitgeist, and that is, what could be more important right now than climate change and working with protecting the earth, also recognizing species, departure from this life, the wiping out of the species, that we have to protect species, we have to protect habitat, we have to protect the Amazon rainforest. So recognizing our connection to nature and that we really are part of the web of nature is just such an important archetype for our times. Well, I think I'm really almost done. I don't want to give you too many examples. Here's the psychedelic pioneers, and I'll just show you one more chart, I think. Although I have so many charts here, but it's very important to recognize about Makemake being activist. And one example of that is Edward Abbey, who wrote The Monkey Wrench Gang about, instead of despoiling, he loved the desert. Instead of despoiling the desert environment, maybe it's better to sabotage the bulldozers. And he does have a connection. That was his writing. The Monkey Wrench Gang was what he wrote, and also Desert Solitaire. And he does have Makemake and strong connection to Mercury, which you would expect since he was writing about these things. And that's what gave me the idea that Makemake was more the activist when I first started looking into it. But also coming along was Greta Thunberg, who obviously is an activist, articulating that really strong presence in her life of standing up to power. I knew she had strong Eris in her chart because addressing the UN at the age of 15. She told the leaders of the world they were screwing up and they needed to protect the environment for her generation and her grandchildren's generation. You know, let's not forget that. And she's very strong in what she says, as you know. So she's a perfect example of a woman warrior standing up to the powers that be on her own sense of this is what is important, this is what's right. Also, all the feminists that I could find have strong Eris in their chart. So Eris was obviously in her chart. I was looking to see if there would be a presence of Makemake as the activist. And what I found when I looked at Greta's chart is not only is Eris in a grand trine with Jupiter and with Pluto, so very strong, square the sun a little bit wide, square the moon if she's born in the early morning, and also this a yod from Makemake, you see here at 19 degrees, and Mars. So the fact that Makemake is a partile inconjunct or a quincunx aspect to Eris as part of that yod really confirmed to me, because this is generational from Makemake to Eris, but having Mars right there too, and having the sun and moon involved as well. So, basically, it's really kind of proof of concept about the activist nature of the archetype, the Makemake archetype. So that's all I wanted to go into at the moment today, and I'll switch back to the other view. So I just wanted to make you aware, I also partly wanted to let you know that I'm going to be giving this talk this weekend if you're interested in getting more thorough information on this. So it's coming up on Saturday at 1 p.m. through NCGR San Francisco chapter, and it is just simply ncgrsanfrancisco.org. All one word in the front, however many letters that is, San Francisco, ncgrsanfrancisco.org. And thanks for your time in seeing this and understanding that it really is very exciting, to have these new planets coming along in Western astrology just now, just when they are officially named by the astronomers, which leads to astrologers beginning to work with them, and we are beginning. And it's fascinating to me, these archetypes being so important philosophically, because not only are we seeing these factors come up in the zeitgeist now, so that we're aware of these issues, including the issues that can result in terms of the Earth rising up against mankind in these recent cataclysms. There's various hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, fires in the West. All of these things they say climate change is a big factor when we pay attention to the scientists, right? So, we have to start doing something about it. And just seeing these things come up astrologically, it also tells us a bit about the human condition. What are we? Who are we? What do we have? And we have a mystical side to our life. There is, independent of whichever particular religion, all religions, a perennial philosophy of understanding connection to a greater whole, to the universe itself, part of the web of life. These are so important as philosophical concepts for our time. Maybe things that were started in the 60s and were sidelined, but now the question becomes, are they viable? Can we have kindness? Can we have peace, love, and harmony in our absolutely mainstream civilization? So that's the question. And the question has to be answered, and the question is who to answer? All of us, every one of us. We all have to participate in this, the greatest challenge of our time, to become a more loving and spiritually organized civilization. So thank you. Best of luck with everything, and talk to you soon. Take care.